somewhat late edition of E.W. Jackson for America. I could not be on at 8:30 because I had to do an interview on American Sunrise on CBN, and so I was with them earlier. Yesterday I was with the Victory Channel. So if you are archiving, recording, preserving in any way those programs to watch, check me out yesterday on the Victory Channel News. The Victory Channel News. I was on at about noontime, or I came on I think around 12:10, somewhere around there. And I just did American Sunrise on CBN a few moments ago. Wrapped that up a few moments ago. So I'm with you. I'm going to do a shortened version of the program today, but there are some things I've got to talk to you about today. And I hope you caught my brief report yesterday on the shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. So there are a couple of things we want to now add, because when the news comes out initially, a lot of the information is misinformation. I'm giving you what's being reported, and now I have to go back and correct some of the things I said, because some of the things they reported were wrong. First of all, they initially reported there were 3 dead, 7 wounded. It turns out that was wrong. It turns out there are only 2 dead. I think that's 2 plus the shooter, and I think the 3 was not including the shooter. But then there were 5 dead. That was wrong. 5 wounded. That was wrong. And I was assuming, by the way, I was wrong in this, just assuming, I was probably using the pronoun he, assuming it was a male. Turns out it was a female who did the shooting. And they first reported that she was 17 years old. Turns out that she's 15 years old. So there are a lot of issues that need to be resolved in exactly how in the world this 15-year-old, first of all, what prompted this woman. And of course there were some rumors about her transitioning or being a transgender of some kind. That's why I'm wearing my earpiece and got a suit and tie on, because I just did that program. You probably look at me thinking, that's not the way he's doing with the rest of the program. I'm usually a lot less formal for these programs. But at any rate, there are a lot of issues. There's a rumor that she was transitioning, trying to do the impossible, which is to go from female to male. We don't know whether that's true or not, so let me just say that. But there were rumors. Rumors that there is a manifesto out there, that she was writing a manifesto on why she was doing that. Again, we don't know whether that's true or not. I say all of this now with, of course, I should always do that with caution, because the early reports often prove to be inaccurate, and that's what's happened here. A lot of the early reports were completely off, because 3 different versions of how many people were killed, 2 different versions of how old this person was. I think there was one other little piece of it. Well, again, we don't know whether the manifesto, whether the transitioning reports are true or not. I'm sure we will confirm whether the manifesto is hers, if there is one, but we may not ever see it, because remember, the shooting at Uvalde, we still haven't gotten this manifesto that this gender confused, wicked, this was a woman, I think, trying to transition to a man. But we've never heard that. It really exasperates. It really exasperates me that our public officials infantilize the American people and treat us like children. You don't, this is too much for you. You don't need to know this. No, we do need to know it. We need to know what kind of ideas are circulating out there. Now, here again, I'm only speculating on this, but I believe this is true for Uvalde. If there proves to be a manifesto in this case, I believe it would probably be true for this manifesto. Remember, these are both attacks on Christian schools, and I believe that the message is, you Christians, you haters, you bigots, you homophobes, you transphobes, you are in the way of real progress, and we've got to get rid of you. We've got to get you out of the way. I told y'all the most credible threat on my life that I've ever gotten, and I've had people say nasty things to me, and but the most credible threat, the one that was investigated by the FBI, was by a homosexual activist. I think we can't put our head in the sand and pretend. Look, let me just back up and say this. so that it's really, really clear. The spirit that animates homosexuality is a wicked, evil spirit. You know what I mean by spirit? I mean demonic forces. The demonic forces that animate, that infuse, that spread, that infect people with this spirit of sexual deviancy, homosexuality. I'm in the wrong gender, and all this stuff. We need to approach children and get children involved in this, because children need to be liberated from their what they call it, their assigned gender. This is all demonic. And so look, you can't separate that from all the other wicked things that come with it. Now, by the way, I'm not saying every homosexual is a murderer, or every homosexual is a rapist, or every homosexual is a child molester. I'm not saying that, okay? Because human beings do have free will, and they can, based upon their personality, not have certain impulses that others are prone to, or they can resist certain impulses that they might have, but they say, I know that's wrong, I'm not doing that. Human beings are capable of that. But that doesn't change the fact that the spirit, the wicked spirit that animates that, is just like the spirit that animated all those men to show up at Lot's door and demand that they be allowed to rape the men, what they thought were men visiting. Those turned out to be angels. But they wanted to be allowed to go in and rape those men. That's the spirit of homosexuality. It is a wicked, sinful, degenerate, depraved spirit. You know, and folks, look, let me just say, I know comments like that, which are absolutely biblically true, are the kind of comments that keep me from being invited on Fox anymore, and even some of these other major conservative outlets, because I am not going to lie to you and mince words trying to advance myself, trying to promote myself. I'm simply not going to do it. We've got enough of that in our culture now. Somebody needs to tell the unadulterated, unvarnished, undiluted truth about these matters. And that is one of the reasons why AIDS spread through the homosexual community. That's how it got started. The bathhouses of San Francisco. That's not a coincidence. So that spirit can bring with it violence and hatred. You know, I say we don't hate homosexuals. People, they'll interpret what I'm saying now, oh, he's a hater. Not a bit. Because I know God loves them, I love them, we pray for them, we want them delivered from their bondage to sin. But we can't refuse or fail to call it out simply because it makes people uncomfortable. We've simply got to do it. We got to speak the truth, what? In love. But they are true haters. They are true haters. They're the ones that will block you, destroy you, and in some cases, as we're learning, kill you if they feel they have to. Simply because you are in the way of their perverse vision for what life ought to be. So, I don't, here again, I'm speculating on who this girl, what her issues are, what her problems are. Clearly she has some big ones. The only thing we don't know is exactly what those big problems are. The other thing that nobody else has brought up and that needs to be brought up in these situations, my research has told me that the overwhelming majority of these mass shooters are people from broken, dysfunctional families. Rarely do they come from healthy, intact families. In fact, perhaps if you look deeper, you might find that none of them come from healthy, intact families. But that's probably not true. Just statistically, there'll probably be some that come from decent families where, you know, some of the kids go out and become doctors, lawyers, nurses, engineers, welders, mechanics, and then here's one-off that goes out and becomes a serial killer, goes out and becomes a gangster, goes out and becomes a drug dealer, whatever. I mean, that can happen in a family. We know that. All the kids raised in the same environment. One of them just decides to do evil. I said because human beings are free to make choices about what they want to do in life. That does not change the fact that overwhelmingly the people who commit these acts are people from broken families. And you know, the left are just, all they know is gun control, gun control, gun control. We better start paying attention to the breakdown of the family in our country, or we're going to see not less of this but more of it. Because as people are raised in dysfunctional households, they're going to go out and do dysfunctional things. And some of those things are going to be murderous. The anger, the bitterness, the betrayal, the abandonment that they feel is going to be translated into doing harm to other human beings. So we know this girl had major problems. We just don't know specifically what they are. And I'll tell you something, I'm tired of these officials infantilizing the American people and not giving us the full scoop, telling us the whole story. We need to know what these people are thinking. If there is an ideological strain running through these communities, which I believe there is, even without any evidence, and that's what prompted this gender confused individual to attack the school in Uvalde, and that's what prompted this girl to attack this Christian school. I'm drawing a blank right now, but got this girl to attack in Madison, Wisconsin. Got this girl to attack the school. We need to know that. We need to know it. Because, you know, this stuff can spread underground, and you don't even know it's happening. It's like a virus. You can't see it, but it's spreading. And people are catching it from other people, and you don't even know it. Until somebody gets sick enough that the symptoms then begin to show themselves. And this is the same thing. We need to know what's going on. You know, I pointed out critical race theory began in the hidden halls of academia, particularly in Harvard. And the average citizen didn't know anything about it. They could care less. In fact, critical race theory was being developed when I was at Harvard. And I was in Harvard back in the mid to late 1970s. I started in 75 and graduated in 78. Derek Bell was developing that stuff while I was there. Folks, that's nearly 50 years ago. And now it's in all the government schools pretty much in our country in one fashion, in one form or another. So this stuff that's circulating underground can become deadly poison in places where we don't expect it to erupt. And look up, well, where in the world did that come from? It seeped into the body politic through teaching and training young people who then go out and take leadership roles, and they're bringing all of this garbage in their heads with them. And then they spew it into the systems that they are in charge of or influencing, and before you know it, you got a whole generation of people infected with this mess. That's why there's so many of them who are in agreement ideologically, because they've all been trained in the same perverse institutions. I see, I graduated from Harvard Law School, but I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. I got saved while I was at Harvard, and that shielded me. Because look, most of my classmates, I dare say, are lefties. But I got shielded from all of that by my salvation, because then I began to see things through the lens of God, the lens of God's Word, and then I began to realize, whoa, wait a minute, not so fast. This doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. Killing of unborn babies doesn't make sense. Homosexuality doesn't make sense. Barney Frank, I'm pretty sure Barney Frank, the first openly homosexual member of Congress, was a classmate of mine. Now, he didn't come up, I didn't see him very often. I don't think he attended class very much. I think he just did a lot of study on his own and who knows, maybe cheat a little bit. I don't know. I'm not accusing him of it, but I'm just saying I didn't see him in class very much. Occasionally he would turn up. And he went into Massachusetts and promoted normalizing homosexuality. He wanted to lower the age of consent where adults could have sex with children. I kid you not. That was one of his initiatives. You know, the American people weren't even aware that it was happening, but under the surface, the current was moving. And now it's infected pretty much everything. You can't watch a television program. I'm watching some dumb program. I don't get to watch much television, but I'm watching something and, oh, this might be an interesting plot. And before you know it, some guy pops up and says, oh, and by the way, would you tell my husband? Oh, my goodness gracious. They've got to get it in there because it is about propagandizing the American people to believe what we should never believe, which is that homosexuality is right and good and appropriate and moral and all of that, which it is not. It is wrong and bad and immoral and inappropriate on every level. On every level. And as I said many times before, you know, there's no need in us squawking about the whole gender confusion thing, but then saying, on the other hand, oh, but yeah, but homosexuality, same-sex marriage, that's different. No, it's not. That's how we got here. Once you open the door, once you throw open when the dam comes down, you're not going to get a little leak. You're going to get a deluge. And now that's what we've got. And people telling us that our children need to be informed that when they were called a boy or girl at birth, that was a guess. Oh, and by the way, a discriminatory one at that, because what they should do is simply say not designated, so that the child can later decide what gender they want to be. No matter what their physiology, their biology, their genetics suggest, no, later on they can decide. I mean, we started with so-called gay rights, and this is where we end up. You can't. It's all the same thread, folks. It's all the same thread. And you got a lot of even conservatives, maybe some Christians, who want to kind of accept that. Oh, well, that's okay. But this, oh no, yeah. Well, you know what? Forget it. It won't work, because what you're doing is you're trying to leave the foundation in place and say, but we need to remove a window here, or we need to correct a brick there, and you think that somehow you're going to change the very nature of the building. You won't. This thing is going to continue to march if we don't nip it in the bud and begin to say, you know what, homosexuality is wrong, and we are not sanctioning it. People can do what they want to do as free adults, but what they don't have a right to do is impose that upon us as if that's some kind of protected constitutional classification that we all have to recognize. Because it's not. It's not the same as race. It's not the same as nationality. It's not even the same as religion. So, at any rate, didn't mean to launch into all of that, but this shooting in Madison leaves some unanswered questions, and I thought it'd be an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the breakdown of the family, number one, which again, homosexuality, many of us argued that it was going to accelerate the breakdown of the family. Oh no, it has nothing to do with that. It's nothing. And yes, it does, because it undermines the sacredness of family as God designed it. Because it says, well, that's not sacred, and that's not anybody's design. It's not even true, and it's not even advantageous. And you can have two husbands and two wives, just as you can have a husband and a wife, and it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter. So once you start to redefine things, you undermine the sacredness, the vitality, the absolutism of what was formerly, clearly and unequivocally defined in one way. In one way. Now you say, oh, no, that's not the definition. Well, again, now you've opened the floodgates. Now we got furries running around. And you got kids in school identifying as animals. But when you want it started with this whole so-called gay rights thing where we began to recognize homosexuality as if it were an immutable physiological and genetic characteristic like my skin color, which it's not. I've met many people delivered from homosexuality who aren't practicing the lifestyle, who have renounced it completely. I can't renounce my skin color. I can do it, but it won't change anything. Because this is an immutable, outward, physiological, genetic characteristic which is inscribed on my DNA. Homosexuality is not that. Neither is all this gender confusion nonsense. And we made a big mistake to begin to treat it as if it were. And now we're paying the price for it. And sadly, we got President Trump, who doesn't understand. He doesn't have the revelation I have on this. And yeah, it is revelation because it's from the Word of God. And so he's appointing homosexuals to positions. Big mistake. Because he's normalizing it. I mean, I'd feel better about it even if it turned out some of his appointments were homosexuals and nobody even knew about it. Because the reason for announcing President Trump has appointed the highest ranking gay person is because you were trying to tell the whole country, look, everybody, this is great. This is good. This is normal. This is healthy. It's not. It is not at all. Okay, all right. That, believe it or not, all of that is a discussion as an offshoot of the shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. Let me hit a couple of other things, and then I'm going to get ready to get on out of here. So we know the girl's 15 years old. She goes by the name now. She uses the name Samantha, which is raises another question. Wait a minute, I had her name here. But at any rate, but she goes by the name Samantha, which again is, what is that all about? I mean, 'cause that's not her name. I thought I had it. Let's see, her name is Natalie Rucknow, but she goes by the name Samantha, so I'm not quite sure what that's all about either. But I hope we'll find out more, and I hope that they will be more forthcoming than they were with Uvalde. And I'll leave it at that. And by the way, I did say we got to harden these targets. We got to put people in these schools so they're prepared to throw down if necessary. It can be the principal, it can be a teacher, somebody trained in the use of firearms needs to be in that school. Preferably somebody trained in the use of firearms in crisis situations, because that is dynamic training that people need to be put through if you're going to do that. I've had some of that. And that's at a whole different level than target shooting. It's trying to put you in situations where you are under pressure and you have to draw quickly and you have to fire quickly. You have to make split-second decisions. And nothing can replicate what they've gone through at Madison with these mass shootings. But nevertheless, dynamic training tries to put you in those situations and to give you some muscle memory on what you need to do if you find yourself facing a life-threatening circumstance where there's a shooter on the loose that is killing people. To me, that's not a big deal to find one or two people in a school who want to do that kind of training, have the character for it, and they shouldn't be teaching it if they don't, have the interest in it, are willing to put the time and energy into it, are responsible people. And as far as I'm concerned, those people could conceal carry, depending on what the school wants. They wouldn't have to necessarily open carry, but could conceal carry. But the word could be put out that we do have safety officers here in the school Apparently, this school did not have a resource officer who was prepared, who was armed and ready to go. They didn't have that because it's a private Christian school. But you can train people who teach the school to do that, and then let the school know we do have prepared, trained safety officers here in the school in the event there is a threat to the lives of our students. Because I'm convinced that these killers don't want a confrontation. They want to basically be able to just shoot people like shooting, what is it, pigs in a barrel. And that's what they don't want to be threatened. They want to get the body count high. And they know that if they are faced immediately with counter force, they may not even get to the first person, or may not be able to kill anybody before they're dead. And I think when that word goes out, people know that. I mean, why do you think you never hear about robberies of gun stores? Now, people break in. I'm talking about daylight robberies, because everybody working in the gun store is armed. And the people going in there to buy guns are often armed. That's not the place where you want to go in and commit some kind of daylight strong arm robbery, because you're going to get shot. So you all get the point. Let's see. Oh yes. Oh my goodness. I got to deal with this. ABC is paying President Trump $15 million. They're going to donate that to his presidential library, and another $1 million to pay his legal fees, because George Stephanopoulos made repeated claims that President Trump had been held liable for rape, which is not true. He was held liable for some sort of sexual abuse, not even assault, but abuse. That was what the jury bought. It's a New York jury, of course, probably biased against the man in the first place. But here's the point I want to make about this. I thought about this from a legal perspective. I don't think most Americans understand the difference between being found liable for something in a civil court and being found guilty of something in a criminal court. Because when you are held liable, when you are found liable, the standard in a criminal court is, of course, you must come to a verdict of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And if there is reasonable doubt, the verdict must be not guilty, even if you think the person did it. If the evidence is not there to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, you must acquit that person. It's a very, very high standard. In law schools, they teach law students that it's called truth to a moral certainty. In other words, the evidence before me would allow me to put this person in prison or to forfeit this person's life and go home and sleep in good conscience that I've done the right thing, because the evidence proves to me that this person committed this heinous act. Truth to a moral certainty. Not based upon my feelings, but based upon the evidence. In a civil court, the standard is by a preponderance of the evidence. Now let me explain to you what that means so you understand the difference. In a civil case, if there is a 51% likelihood based on evidence that the person is responsible for what they're holding the person responsible for, we don't even deal with guilt or innocence, responsible for it. And 49% would suggest, well, that they might not be responsible for it. You got a preponderance of the evidence with 51%. I mean, we're talking a whole different ballgame here. And so we're not even in the same league as with a criminal case. And it's much, much easier with a preponderance of the evidence to punish somebody you don't like. Because you don't need the majority agreeing that the person did it. I mean, you don't need it. Forgive me, you need the majority, but you don't need unanimity agreeing that the person did it. Or, and if in a state you do, it's because every state, of course, court can operate by different rules. You know, whereas the federal courts all have the same rules, but state courts will vary from state to state. That's why when I passed the bar exam in Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, I couldn't go down to Florida and practice because the laws in Florida are different. I could practice in Massachusetts or Pennsylvania, but if I wanted to practice somewhere else, I had to pass the bar. And for the most part, sometimes you could get grandfathered in if you've been practicing long enough. But for the most part, you got to go past the bar, indicating that you are familiar with the laws of that particular state. So it may vary from place to place. But civil courts are entirely different. And you know, I'll be very honest, folks. This liability for that, I frankly, I just dismiss that as just war politics. I really do. I mean, I know that Donald Trump has had his share of problems and issues and missteps, but so have we all. And they may not be in the same area, it may not be exactly the same type of thing, but hey, he's been a billionaire playboy. And some of his background has probably some embarrassments in it based upon that. In fact, we've heard some of them. But that case means absolutely nothing. And then for George Stephanopoulos to characterize it as a rape, which is a crime, and say, because really what he was saying, without saying it, he's been found guilty. He hadn't been found guilty of anything. That's really what he was trying to imply. He's guilty of rape. He wasn't found guilty of anything. He's found liable for this amorphous thing called a sexual abuse. And it is somewhat amorphous because it doesn't even rise to a sexual assault. And it certainly is not a rape. What it really suggests is misconduct in a person's space. And you're treating the person in some way that would be deemed inappropriate by at least the majority, in most cases, of a jury in a civil trial. So I just wanted to get that out there for everybody so you understand what these people are trying to do to Donald Trump. And by the way, I had a talk with a friend yesterday, somebody who's been a friend of mine for many, many years, doesn't have the same level of enthusiasm for Donald Trump that I have, and doesn't understand why I support Donald Trump, believe it or not. Yeah. We conservatives can have friends who don't agree with us, and we still love them, and we don't dismiss them out of hand, as long as they don't demand that we adhere to what they think we ought to think in order to be our friend. Hey, no problem. And by the way, this person is generally conservative, but just doesn't think like some conservatives that Donald Trump's been the best thing for the conservative movement. And I explained my position on this. I said, absolutely. I said, I voted for Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump, but I don't agree with everything Donald Trump says or does. I don't work for Donald Trump. I work for God. And I am not going to fail to point out where I disagree with Donald Trump, where I think it's important. Now, I'm always, shall we say, a little bit restrained, because I think to myself, my goodness, this man has got enough people against him. He does not need any more. And I certainly don't want to join that parade. But I'm going to respectfully point out where I disagree with him. I mean, for example, at his press conference yesterday, he said, I have a soft heart for TikTok. Now, I don't know really what that means, because Donald Trump speaks in somewhat, shall we say, inexact ways. And you have to wait to, that's why I say, it's not what he says that matters, it's what he does. Because his policies indicate what he really, where he's really coming from. But he said, I have a soft spot in my heart for TikTok. And I'm thinking, I don't. Because TikTok needs to divest of Chinese ownership, and that's what needs to be the president's preoccupation. And look, I don't want to close down TikTok. That's never been my objective. But I don't want communist China having access to TikTok, or having ownership in TikTok, or using TikTok data in order to undermine our country and undermine the American people and violate our privacy. That's what I don't want. I want China out of it. The law says now they must be out of it unless the Supreme Court reverses that and says it's unconstitutional, which I can't believe that the Supreme Court would be that stupid. Some of these leftists probably would, because they're in love with China. They probably would be that stupid. But I can't believe that you get a majority on the court to say that the Congress cannot ban a foreign adversary / enemy from ownership in a sensitive communication entity in our country. And I can't believe that the Supreme Court would say such a dumb thing. So the only question is enforcing it. And I trust it will be enforced. I've joined TikTok now, expecting that there will be Chinese divestment. By the way, if that didn't happen, I'd have to quit. I can't do it. I won't do it. I stayed off TikTok for a long time because I simply didn't want to feel like I was betraying my principles and betraying my country by supporting something that I knew was controlled by an enemy of our country, and that was using it. By the way, TikTok in China is not the same as TikTok in America, because all the stuff that they use to try to undermine our young people, they don't use in China. They're trying to build their young people up as good communists. They're trying to undermine our young people as proud citizens of a free constitutional republic. So I'm glad that President Trump won this lawsuit against ABC, and they had to pay, although I've read some commentators saying, but they got off very easy with this settlement because they could have been required to give them $100 million. Because, you know, accusing somebody of rape is no joke. That is no joke, folks. And I'm glad that the president didn't put up with it and held their feet to the fire. And George Stephanopoulos is unapologetic, although he's required to put forth an apology. It is quite clear that the man he's got Trump derangement syndrome, and it's quite clear that he believes the very worst about President Donald Trump. I wonder what's under the covers of George Stephanopoulos, if you know what I mean. I shudder to think like he's some kind of icon of virtue. Give me a break. Because these leftists don't even know what virtue and morality is, but they're very quick to judge someone else for it. Okay, well look, that's going to do it. I better go because I'm late as it is. I started late. I've almost gone as long as I normally do. I think I started at 9 o'clock, and it's almost 9:40. So look, I'll be back at the usual time tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. You all know what to do. Look, we are in this fight until we completely and totally decimated Marxism, socialism, atheism, secularism as important, or I should say, as influential ideas in our country. We are in it until we've done that. Until the country en masse looks at those ideas and says, well, nobody believes that stupidity. We're a Judeo-Christian nation. Everybody knows that. Where our country looks back and says, I can't believe that we actually thought it was okay to kill all these unborn babies. I can't believe we ever believed that. I can't believe anybody ever thought that. Well, praise God, nobody does now. That's where I want to get our country to. And I'm going to be fighting until we do. And I'm hoping to see all, if not a portion of that, if not all of that, before I leave this earth. Before I go home to be with Jesus. So, that's the task. That's the goal. So just because President Trump got elected doesn't mean the fight is over. In fact, it ought to catapult us to the forefront even more, because now we have a chance to really make some progress, because we have a federal government that is friendly toward our values and toward America instead of being hostile toward it. Under Joe Biden, The whole federal government is hostile toward the American people, hostile toward our country, and hostile toward the values that made America great. Listen, God bless everybody. You all know what to do. Stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up. Because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side. You know what? The whole time I wasn't wearing my mic. That is terrible. Well, I'll put it on for the last 15 seconds. Forgive me. I don't know how in the world I did that. Left my earpiece on, which is of no value for the program, and took my microphone off. Wow. It must have sounded like I was speaking in a tunnel. But God bless everybody, and thank you all. You on Instagram will hear me the same way you did, but the folks online probably heard a somewhat tunnel-like version of my voice. But it's in the can now. It's real live TV, so there's no way to undo it. God bless everybody.